Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the TheADDARMY, and today I'm going to bring you the final day of the 7-day uploads, and it's going to start with Pokemon and it's going to end with Pokemon. So we have a Pokemon theory. So first, I just want to thank you all if you've enjoyed this week or watched any of the videos, I appreciate it. If you subscribed, I really appreciate you guys joining. So without further ado, we're still on the race to 100 subs, so don't forget to join in. But we're going to get into this last theory for this week, and yeah, I will try this again. It's been a lot of work, and I was surprised how difficult it was to make 7 videos straight, but you know, it was interesting to do, and I'm happy I had to do it. So without further ado, thank you guys, and let's get into it. So we are on, well, at least what I'm going to call the Doomsday theory, and by the thumbnail and the title, you got to understand how the Paradox Pokemon came into existence. Now, first and foremost, I want to explain this isn't probably going to be canon, but this is just my theory about it, so just letting you know. Yeah, so getting into what the theory is, the Doomsday theory is actually one thing that I like to talk about being the spark that took place during Generation 6, because Generation 6 was a very pivotal game in my opinion because it introduced a lot of different things. The first thing it really introduced, at least in my opinion, and I mean fully, did this, was the existence of multiple different Pokemon universes. Now, we knew that there was kind of this idea floating around from just different things that happened prior to Generation 6, but there's one thing in a few things in Generation 6 that really talk about a split universe, the idea that there's probably a world somewhere without Mega Evolution, thanks to, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. And this is where this theory begins, that this is the post-world of X and Y, but this is where the heroes had failed. So let me get into it now. We're going to start with what I call the beginning of the Paradox. Past Pokemon are better known as the Disaster Theory X. Disaster Theory X takes place right as the end of X. The game is actually taking place, where Lysander's about to fire off the ultimate weapon. However, what happens is the hero is defeated. You fail to defeat Lysander, and Lysander succeeds in firing off the weapon. He is unknowingly going to do something terrible, as the weapon does more devastation than he would expect, devastating most of life, even including himself. I do think that because of what I think happens, the entire region of Kalos is devastated. It's not wiped out completely, like there will still be things that exist, but it's devastated to a point where it's crazy, and the world itself is completely shaken, as essentially the reverberation of the attack that he fires from the weapon basically devastates the entire planet. And this is where I think things begin to happen, where life for the most part is devastated. However, Xerneas's actual ability and its tie with Yveltal in the story of X and Y is more so an idea of life and death having to take place. And effectively, after the weapon devastates the planet, there is something that happens in 2 places. I do think in Paldea that still exists enough that the Area Zero does reverberate. However, I do think what also happens is that this is Xerneas's wish for life to be reborn on the planet and to be saved. So I do believe both of those things go in tandem. I do think that due to what we're learning about the terrestrial energy, the crystals, all this stuff, we have some idea of involving wishes and wills. And I do think this is where they tie together. So the death of Xerneas effectively leads to the rebirth of, life on the planet. However, we do see something different, where a lot of the Pokemon that either did or didn't survive, and the ones that are struggling along, they are recreated. However, they're recreated in different ways to adapt to the new terrains. One thing that I would find very thematic, right, is the fact that somehow the environment has become more harsh. So instead of it being more, I would say, empty, it's harsh. So it's like very barren. There's lots of differences in terms of where you can find like water, stuff like that. And it basically works in turning these Pokemon that were originally not too, feral looking into being more rugged, dangerous, powerful, having to rely on more strength. That's why we would see a lot of the different past Paradox Pokemon adapt these different abilities. Even something like a Jigglypuff grows fangs and has this long tail used for like maybe grappling opponents before it has to bite them. Basically, all the different features for the Paradox Pokemon start to show themselves. And it makes a lot of sense that the ones that survive, they have to start spreading out. Maybe it changes behaviors, as we would see something like even Great Tusk, that's basically based off of a mammoth. But, you don't really see them in herds in the same way you would see like a Donphan and Phanpy. So what makes me believe is that maybe their feralness and the less resources change the way that they behave, and they start, acting out on their own. Pokemon like Roaring Moon, in order to survive, but also in order to maybe thrive in this new land, they adopt power from what they would do at the Mega Evolution. Something I do believe is probably the Mega Stones are probably eaten by something like Roaring Moon to an extent. Maybe they find maybe Keystones or something and they swallow them, allowing them to adapt more of the power that they would have as Mega Salamence. So it's just an idea, but basically, this is the world that these Paradox Past Pokemon come from. A devastated future where they have to live in terms of fighting for survival, but at the same time, life has been restored to the planet as before it would have just had no life after the weapon for the most part. So that's basically where the first half of the Doomsday Theory is with X. Basically, it's just a brand new world with Pokemon that basically had to adapt to a very harsh environment. Now, Doomsday Y is one where I think it's more interesting and kind of fits thematically with what we would assume with people destroying the planet, and kind of is similar to what happens in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon with, the whole Necrozma thing, but let me get into it. So effectively what would happen in the main theory here is you get this situation where the Pokemon are destroyed, like they just almost all go extinct thanks to the use of the weapon. Now, this is more sad, but it's obviously because Yveltal is effectively the embodiment of death in at least its story, where it focuses on death being a natural and necessary process for life to be reborn, where Yveltal and Xerneas kind of go hand in hand with each other. Now, Yveltal's ability to basically devastate everything was the sad truth, and it wasn't on its own intention, obviously, so it didn't expect it, but basically the whole planet is affected in such a way that Pokemon all in the planet begin to die. They just die. Only a few are able to avoid this situation. I think only maybe 3 of them, which I could confirm at least would make sense that they would survive something like this, which would be the life force being drained from most of them. And for the 3 of them that would survive, only because one could just literally hop dimensions. The other 2, though, however, they have a way to escape thanks to people, being Porygon and Rotom. But, because Porygon isn't favored by the Pokemon Company, he's not important for this story. Now, Rotom is very important because Rotom surviving would mean that humans would obviously have an important ally in the Pokemon world to survive. But more importantly, why would Rotom survive? Well, it's more so because Rotom itself is a very unique Pokemon where it can apply itself to different appliances, right? So effectively it can actually plug itself into a device, no pun intended, and the device itself could probably recharge it. So if a weapon like this went off and we were expecting the Rotoms maybe to get destroyed, I think one of their advantages is that they would be able to basically utilize the appliances as shields. And in some cases, I think they could probably do the cyberspace thing that Porygon could do, because we do know that Rotom Dex is a thing. So if the Rotom Dexes are a thing, I'm pretty sure that means Rotoms can just like hide inside of cyberspace if they wanted to. But yeah, that's where this theory begins. Now, the problem starts when people start to realize, well, the planet was devastated to a very big point, and I do think one of the problems that they would see is that Pokemon served a very important ecological niche on the planet. So the thing is, with all these niches left open and we need different creatures to do things, people would need to find a way to rebalance the ecosystem. And the only way I think they could do this was by actually creating their own Pokemon. Now, the reason I think this is possible is that some of the Paradox future Pokemon don't necessarily possess all the traits of their past or their current, I guess, predecessors, if you will. Like, they don't look exactly the same. They kind of fit with a different perspective or idea in mind. So I do think what would take place is people trying to figure out, well, how do we make this work? And they would decide, well, the best way to do it is to base it off of what we remember. So if you guys know what Memba berries are, this is basically that moment where people are thinking, well, what do they need? What can they do? And they start to design Pokemon for specific niches and different opportunities to do different things. That's why I think actually the Paradox Past and future Pokemon, there may be more, like a lot more, but for the fact that there may not be that many would actually make a lot of sense in terms of species, because the diversity would be rather low, because on both sides of the theory, we're stuck with being able to do work with what we've got. In the case of the past, it's only who survived or who maybe was given life again. And in the future, it's what can we build, what can we design, what can get the job done, what can work. Now, what would take place, I think, is in the future, at least, the designs for the armors or like the husks are basically like the appliances. So I think we'd probably have some whiz designers say, hey, what if we just use the Rotoms and put the Rotoms inside of like armored suits to start working on the planet to fix it again? And obviously people would probably shake their head saying that's probably stupid, but then some guy would say, that sounds cool. And they'd start making the robot suits basically for the Rotoms. But one thing that they didn't expect is that the Rotoms would adapt so well to these new suits. It's not like with their appliance forms. They like it so much that they'd actually, start to live as these creatures and start to, want to have more of them and start filling the ecological niches that they want to do. Maybe it's just more so the Rotoms were bored and they wanted to do something, but the point is they get to be their own beings inside these things. That's why I think when we start to look at the designs for what we get for the future Paradox Pokemon, it kind of makes me feel like it's more flashy or funny. Like the people wanted to have a good time with them, but also at the same time wanted to make things that they liked. Like that's at least what I see, because if you look at their picks for the future Paradox Pokemon, a lot of them are kind of, I wouldn't say goofy, but they're all like kind of neat, cool looking, maybe sleek design Pokemon that really have a lot of like power, pride, stuff like that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I do think that the future Paradox Pokemon, though, have more of a struggle, because they have to be more durable to whatever the environment's like. So that's why I think we have things like Iron Treads, Iron Jugulus. Geez, I always forget Tyranitar's one because no one uses it. But, no, I don't think it's Iron Tank or something. But yeah, that one. Funny enough, I think Delibird itself is probably one of the more unique ones, where I think someone designed it for an actual purpose, where I think what Delibird was supposed to be able to do was travel around the Pokemon world in its new form and kind of like maybe deliver stuff, use its, like, since it's a water type, maybe rehydrate against opponents, stuff like that. Almost like a terraformer, like where it would probably plant. You could I could see like Iron Treads digging the ground, someone planting seeds, and then they would just put water there to try to regrow plants or something like that. So, that's an idea. And then this gets to the thing where I would say like Iron Valiant's a good one to explain why maybe people designed them, is that Iron Valiant is like someone saying, oh, well, I remember Gallade and I remember Gardevoir, but what if I like made one that was even better than both? That's why it gets a freaking sword staff, like basically taking the rimmed arms of like Mega Gallade and adding them as like a weapon to this creature, which is like obviously designed for combat. Also makes me think that the future Paradox might be really, really dangerous and bad. Like people are getting ready for war, because a lot of the Pokemon picked to be future Paradox Pokemon are very dangerous. Like they're very dangerous. Like I think of one that's like all of them. They're all optimized for some type of like combat, I would say, or like some type of skill set. So maybe there's like a war going on. That's also another idea, that the Y world is like just people in flux of conflict with one another. So they keep building machines to like check each other out. So that's also an idea. I didn't even talk about Slitherwing. Slitherwing's not scary, but not dangerous all the same. But that's the Doomsday Theory, guys, both X and Y. I hope you guys liked it. Thank you so much for being a part of the 7-day uploads. And as always, this is Brad from the TheADDARMY signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.